Welcome to Inside Richmond, the official vodcast of Richmond Rugby Club. My name is Tom Soulsby, and today we're joined by our Director of Rugby, Steve Hill. Hilly, welcome to the show. Just firstly, how are you, and how has lockdown life been treating you?
It's good, Tom. I mean, it's very strange, because at this time of the season, although we'd be rested and whatever else, there'd be a lot of planning going on, for certain dates. And the rather strange thing is we're doing lots of planning, but we've got no idea what dates we're planning for. So it's been a bit weird. Myself, my family, we're all pretty safe. So I think we've just got used to a very different routine. My dog's lost about 3 kilos because he's getting walked about 4 times a day. But yeah, no, it's been very different. But I'm certainly missing the club and definitely missing all the players and everybody else. I think if you're a rugby person, you're naturally sociable, and this is not a good place to be for those sociable amongst us. But I'm sure we'll get back there eventually.
Obviously, lockdown has its challenges, but for you personally, what's been the best thing about it for you?
Well, interestingly, my 89-year-old father moved in to live with us at the end of November, which, given the current situation, is a real blessing. And lockdown has meant I've spent a huge amount of time talking to him, and which I probably wouldn't have time to do normally. And that's been fantastic. So we've been sort of going through all the family history, and his father was a military man in India, and at the age of 49, married a 15-year-old lady over there, was my grandmother, and they ended up having about 6 children. So fascinating. It sounds like it's from 300 years ago, but it's only sort of one generation removed. So I think that's probably been the best part of it, sort of having the much time with Dad as I've had.
And I guess the worst part of lockdown, would you say not being able to get to the barbers is one?
Yeah, definitely. I think my hair is the longest it's been since I was about 16 years of age, when I think that was the last time long hair was in fashion. That's rather strange. Christine and I have been getting on really well, and we didn't want to potentially ruin that by her trying to cut my hair. So at the moment we're just staying safe. Another month and we might have to take the plunge. But anyway, it's definitely different than normal.
Fantastic. As a club, we have been very proactive during this period out in the community. How proud are you of everything that we've put in place and everything we're still doing?
Well, I think it's been absolutely fantastic, and I think that we are very much a community club. That is the banner under which we operate, and I think we've showed as much as any other club I know that we actually live that particular banner. I mean, the way that we've got out into Richmond, the way that we sort of linked up with AFC Wimbledon, and collecting the food and stuff for all the needy people has been fantastic. We're still operating and helping the local people when that demand comes in. So I'm really proud of everything that everyone's done. And I think our community department under Don Palaccio does a fantastic job throughout the year. But they've stepped up hugely over the last sort of 2 months. So it's something I think we should all, as members of Richmond, be very proud of.
Looking back at the 2019-20 season, obviously a fantastic one for our men's first team with promotion confirmed back to the championship. But obviously a frustrated end, and with the women losing their spot in the Tyrrells. How would you summarise that season?
I think it was, I think we've got to be careful not to allow the current crisis, and the current crisis is very, very serious for many people. But I think it would be wrong to allow us to sort of, deflect from what a fantastic season it was for Richmond Rugby Club. I mean, we're only the second team ever to be relegated from the championship and bounce back, 1 year later. We had a lot of senior players, and some would say our best players retire or leave at the end of last season. So with a very new team, we were going up against sides that we know spend an awful lot more money on their particular players and building a squad. And yet, after 25 games, we were clearly ahead of the rest of the field. We scored more points than anybody else. We achieved more bonus points than any other team. We conceded, fewer points than anybody else. So by anybody's metric, we were the best team in that league after those games, and I think, thoroughly deserved to go up. And it's a fantastic achievement for this, for what is a relatively new squad to come together in such a short time and do so well.
We obviously at the moment have no idea when the 2021 season will start. But for you personally, have you started planning for that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, as my wife will tell you, my job's a job that never stops. And, the players might have some downtime, but the coaches, administrators, we're constantly, on the lookout for ways we can improve the club. So, I mean, I think because Richmond has been so successful, not just the first team, but all the other teams as well, we've become an in-demand club. I've had probably in excess of, 35, 40 players been in touch about joining the club next year. Some of those will be in the performance squad. Some of those guys will be sort of starting lower down. But certainly there seems to be a really good feel about the club. So, and it's important to touch base with those guys and, tell them about the club and encourage them to come and join us. Because, it's absolutely key. I mean, every year, we have an influx of players, but, they realise that, they've got to get past a very good squad already. I mean, the really pleasing thing for me is, the vast majority of the guys who are involved with Richmond First 15 this year are going to be at Richmond next season. And that's a great place to start. And, they're already a very, very good team and they've got a chance to get better.
You mentioned that. Obviously, rugby is certainly going to be very different than what we know. And, we don't know what the impact of COVID-19 will have on rugby. But in terms of the actual championship, we know funding has been reduced. Are you confident we can compete strongly in this league going forward?
Well, I think, we 4 years ago, we were promoted at a time when, the other 11 teams were all full time. And, I think people, forget that, we finished 10th out of 12 teams in that particular season. So, we certainly competed. It took us 16 games to win our first game, but what a fantastic night that was, beating London Scottish, as our first win in the championship. And then the second year, we did even better. We finished a place higher. So, and as I say, that was the time when the other 11 teams were full-time pro. The championship is going to be a very different picture next season. I mean, as it stands at the moment, there's only 6 teams are declaring themselves full-time pro, and one of those might have to go to part, sort of full-time. So I think we stand to be much more competitive than we were last time around. And I think, our model of, combining, having a really good career outside of rugby, but then playing rugby at the highest level is something we're very used to. There's going to be, clubs in this league next year who are just beginning that journey. And it's not an easy journey at first. And I think for players, administrators, it offers, lots and lots of challenges, which, are not easy to overcome. So, we've got to take advantage of being ahead of one or two of those clubs and make sure that we start strongly.
And obviously the big challenge of Surrey is an exciting one for everyone at Richmond. We've obviously played them before back when we were in the Premiership, but definitely something for everyone to look forward to.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's absolutely fantastic for the Championship. In terms of its profile, but you think about, the Richmond players themselves. What a great sort of something to work towards, to getting selected to play in, what we know will be 2 league matches against Saracens, and the chance to, potentially go against, current England internationals. I mean, that doesn't happen, very often these days unless you're playing in the Premiership. In fact, it probably never happens. So a chance for our players, guys who are part-time players but very serious about their rugby, to run out against guys who are internationals, possibly even British Lions. That's a great motivation to work as hard as you can, to get through to get selected for those particular games.
Moving swiftly now to the women's section. It's been confirmed that the women will play in the Championship South next season. Do you see this as a really exciting new chapter for our club?
Well, in many ways I do, and I know, we were, I think, as a club, and I personally was very disappointed. In fact, no, I was angry, that we were, denied a place in the TP15s going forward, because I thought we'd more than shown, our ability to compete at that particular league. In many ways that's out of our control, and we've now got to park that. But I think, this coming season could be a really exciting time for our women's section. I mean, it's going to be really important that we establish, our women's section as a section itself. You know, I have no interest in being a club that's going to help, you know, the other TP15 sides in terms of dual registration or loan players. You know, the Richmond women's section this season is very much going to be a section on itself. If players want to come from other clubs to join us and play for Richmond, that is fantastic. You know, we are an open club. We encourage people to come. But if you're playing for Richmond this season, you're playing for Richmond this season. And it's as simple as that. And I think, you know, it's not dissimilar to the men's section a year ago. You know, after we got relegated, it gave us a chance to sort of, you know, regather, to sort of look at what we were doing, you know, to adjust, to change one or two things, and to come back really strongly. Now, I mean, unfortunately, in the women's game, there isn't an automatic right to, you know, to be promoted back up into TP15s. But I think it's really important that, you know, we, you know, in the Championship South, show just how strong we are. You know, and I certainly want us to, you know, to be, you know, right at the very top of that league at the end of next season, and then for the forthcoming seasons, so that when, you know, there's a chance to go back up into, you know, that top league, you know, we're in the best position to do that.
I want to chat a bit now about your Richmond career to date. You've obviously been at the club for some time now. But for those that don't know, when did you arrive at Richmond? Why did you join the club? And what was your initial feeling of the club?
Okay, so I joined the club in April 2010. So, you know, I'm about to go into my 11th season. I'd previously spent 14 years as the director of rugby at Oxford University, and that role came to an end in, I think, sort of February, March time of 2010. My initial reaction was interesting. I went to watch Richmond play at Lydney in a league game. And in typical Richmond style in those days, I think we were 4 tries to 1 up, and then managed to lose 5 tries to 4. And I was introduced to certain members of the committee who were in their tweed jackets and yellow corduroy trousers, and spoke like they'd all gone to Eton. And it very much sort of confirmed one or two of the things that I'd heard about Richmond. But you know, in many ways, that was very quickly dispelled, because I knew a few of the players who were already at Richmond, and a few more that I'd coached at Oxford came to join, and a few guys I'd coached at England students came to join. You know, and it was a very ambitious club. I mean, you know, this was a club, I knew the history of Richmond. I mean, Blackheath was my club, and, you know, I'd played against Richmond many times for Blackheath first team. And, you know, I knew they were on a journey back up to where they had been, you know, before the game went professional. And very much, you know, the task I was given by the board was, you know, to get us from level 4, National 2 South, you know, back up to National 1, you know, level 3, which was where the club was before the professional game came over. So, but no, it was lots of challenges. I'm sure I stepped on a few toes. I'm sure 1 or 2 people left because they weren't necessarily happy with what I was saying I was going to do, but that's fine. I mean, you know, people have got a choice. They can get on the bus or they can get another one, and you know, it was very simple from that point of view. But no, it was an interesting start. I mean, I think the biggest challenge was, after a really good pre-season, we then went and lost our first 3 league matches. You know, which for me as a new director of rugby was devastating. You know, having said that, you know, we still finished, I think, sort of 4th in the league that year. But that made it, you know, that was a really, you know, tough start. So, and that showed to me that, you know, as I probably knew already, it was going to take more than 1 or 2 seasons to get things, you know, exactly how I wanted it to be.
You mentioned the bus before, and the bus, I guess, is a good one for Richmond people, because the bus represents a good trip home from hopefully a good away win. But what makes this club so different to others? Is it that social side?
Well, I'd like to think all rugby clubs have got, you know, a good social side, but I think the key, you know, it's a real key component of Richmond Rugby Club's about, you know, and to me that's fundamental to our success on the field, is that people enjoy their rugby experience. You know, whether that's training on a Tuesday or Thursday night, you know, whether that's in the gym with their mates on Mondays and Wednesdays, you know, whether that's on the train, you know, up to sort of Darlington, or, you know, on a wet sort of December morning. You know, you got to remember guys are getting trains like 6:30 on a Saturday morning to get to Euston, to get up to these places to play a match. You know, we go to Penzance to play Cornish Pirates. You know, we're getting back at sort of 1 in the morning, you know, on a Sunday coming into Monday, and guys are going to go to work the next day. So you've got to love and enjoy that, to sort of do that sort of week in, week out, and season after season. But yeah, and I think we put a lot of time into our social sides. You know, it's well planned, and we involve everybody in it. You know, what I like about Richmond is, you know, there are no cliques. You know, lots of other clubs talk about a one club mentality. Well, I think we try and live that, and I think we succeed in that most of the time. And I think that's key to our success. And you know, when I talk to people about Richmond in other clubs and even in other countries, I mean, I was on the phone to a prospective player today in Hong Kong, and I asked him, I always ask, so what do you know about Richmond? And the first thing that he said was, it's a fantastic rugby club. It's got the old values of rugby, you know, people enjoying themselves. And that's great as director rugby to hear, because it means, you know, people are getting that message sort of far and wide.
Absolutely. You know, you've achieved a lot at Richmond. Is there one highlight that really sticks to your mind as your favourite?
That's a difficult one. I certainly think, you know, the wins over London Scottish are incredibly special. You know, it's a gladiatorial crowd. You know, and it's fantastic to sort of coach a team amongst that. But to win those games, I think are very special. I think also, you know, the promotion, you know, 4 years ago to the Championship, a little bit like last year. You know, nobody really thought that, you know, we could do it. You know, and I think, you know, even ourselves at Christmas time, we weren't really thinking about getting promotion. You know, we were hoping to get in the top four. But, you know, given, you know, the sort of structure, given the fact that, you know, financially we don't reward the players anywhere near the level that the other clubs do, but we reward them in other ways in terms of their experience, you know, to enable a side, you know, based on that, to get all the way to the Championship, you know, and then, you know, be competing against full-time professionals week in, week out. I think that achievement probably, you know, is right up there with anything that I've done in the sort of, you know, 10 seasons I've been here.
Fantastic. And obviously, before Richmond, I've got a few sort of random questions here for you that I've done some background on you, Steve. Is it true that you used to wash windscreens at traffic lights?
No.
Interestingly enough, that's on the Richmond website. So I'm not sure where that came from. We'll move on swiftly.
No idea where that's come from.
But anyways, you lived, you worked, and you played in Kuwait, I believe. Can you speak about that experience and facing the All Blacks?
Yeah, no. So, I mean, as a player, I dislocated my shoulder a couple of times and was told I couldn't play top level rugby anymore. And so I applied for a teaching role and ended up in Kuwait, where I wasn't going to play rugby, but ended up playing for 5 full seasons. And at sort of 25 years of age was sort of captain and coach at a fairly young age, and had a fantastic time. It was a great experience, I have to say that, because I met Christine there, and we've been married ever since. But in many ways, it was a huge education for me. And it's sort of, you know, give you an example. Before every match, you know, our home pitch, the whole team would have to line up and walk the length of the pitch and take all the stones off of the sand so we could play on it. And then we had to water the pitch, and then we had to mark it out ourselves. So it would take about 2 hours of preparation before we could actually play the game. And so, you know, sort of things like that, you know, sort of really sort of, you know, grounded you in terms of that. But the Kuwait, we had a really successful time. Second year I was there, we won the Gulf League for the first time in the league's history. We would travel all over the Gulf and play, you know, Bahrain and Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Muscat. So they were really good trips. And then in my last year there, the Arabian Gulf were invited to play in the Hong Kong Sevens, so the 1990 Hong Kong Sevens. And I was only representative who got selected from Kuwait, and turned up in Hong Kong. And then the draw came out, and the first game of the Hong Kong Sevens 1990 was the Arabian Gulf versus New Zealand. And in those days, you know, there were no difference between their Sevens teams and their 15s. So I was propping against Zinzan Brook, who wasn't a bad number 8, and they had people like, you know, Gallagher and Schuster in the backs. I mean, it was a full, you know, All Blacks, national 7 sort of thing. We didn't win, but we managed to get through to the semi-final of the bowl competition. And that, you know, that was a huge highlight of my playing career, to play in the Hong Kong Sevens amongst those caliber of players. And the lovely thing was as well, Christine was there, and our 6-month-old baby was there as well, Talene. So the whole family there to see that occasion.
What a fantastic story. And then obviously you moved back to the UK. You started working for Oxford Uni as their director of rugby. Is that right?
Yeah, so the game went professional in 1996.
Yeah.
In fact, I did about 2.5, 3 months at Harlequins when Dick Best was director of rugby there, but that was only part time because for those that don't remember, the first year of professional rugby in this country, probably only half the players in each squad were actually full time. The other half were sort of giving up jobs. So training, for example, at Harlequins was still in the evenings for the main squad. So I was doing a bit of coaching there. But then I applied for and got the role as full-time director of rugby at Oxford, and that was a very different experience. I didn't go to Oxford University, I didn't go to a fee-paying school, I went to a local grammar school, so it was a very different environment. But the rugby, rugby's rugby, wherever you play and whichever club you're in, and that was a club that needed to modernise, needed to change. The classic example was we went on a pre-season tour to Australia and Japan to play 4 matches in 2 weeks. They had 3 days training before they left, and at the 3 days training, we had 5 centres in the squad and only 2 second rows. And yet we're going off to play 4 matches against really top flight, opposition, and we struggled because of that. But it was a fantastic experience. I had a great time at Oxford University. The downside of the job was you were only judged on one result every year. So literally you could win every game during the term, but if you lost the varsity match, it was a failure of a year, and vice versa. And that put a huge amount of pressure on the players and obviously on the sort of director of rugby and the coaches. But the people you met, the experiences that they had, the tours that I went on were absolutely fantastic. So I was very lucky to be there for sort of 14 seasons, and then from there come on to Richmond.
And just a quick one, is it true that you faced my boys, the Wallabies, in a scratch match featuring the likes of Gregan, Larkin, Roth?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm terrible with dates, whatever year it was, the Canadian rugby players went on strike. And in fact, Australia was supposed to play Canada at the beginning of November before they came and played their autumn internationals against sort of England, Ireland, Scotland. So we got a call from Eddie Jones because Brett Robinson, who was the captain of Oxford in that year, had played for Eddie, had been Eddie's captain at ACT Brumbies, and basically said, look, could we come over and play a match against Oxford University as a warm-up game? So I literally had 3.5 weeks to organise an international match at Iffley Road against Australia. And as you say, it was the full Australian side because, they were looking for, game preparation. And a huge crowd, turned up that day. I think we had in excess of sort of 10,000 people in the ground. And amazingly, with 20 minutes to go, I think we were only 7 points behind. We just tackled our hearts out, and we're in the game for the vast majority. In the end, I think we sort of leaked about sort of 4 tries in the last sort of 10 minutes. The guys were just exhausted from making sort of more than 200 tackles. But it was a fantastic experience, and fair play to the Wallabies. They hang around for quite a while and sat down and chatted to the guys, and then I think something like 5 years later, Joe Roth came as a student to Oxford University. And he said very much his experience as playing for Australia, on that occasion, sort of helped to make that decision. So it was certainly worth putting on that international to get someone like Rothie for 2 years after that.
I can imagine. What a player. Okay, just to finish off, Steve, we've got some questions from the outer, so some of our followers and members and so forth. There's only a few of these, so do not worry. The first question from Kieran: who has been your favourite coach? So I'm not sure if that means as a player or as a coach yourself, but whatever way you want to take that question.
I think the most influential coach I've had is a guy called Brian Ashton, who used to coach Ireland and used to coach England, was very heavily involved in Bath in their glory days. Brian acted as a bit of a mentor for me as a young coach, and has always been somebody that I can sort of reach out to. So, and he's just always had a fantastic take on the game. He's a real purist. And I've always found his insight fascinating. So I think he's probably the coach who's had the most influence on my career.
Okay, the next one from a Richmond member. If you could go back and win one game you lost, which one would it be?
Well, if you're talking about this season, it would have been Plymouth at home, I can assure you. That was devastating, losing the last minute when we'd been, 4 tries to 1 up or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and probably very close behind was the same time this year against Cinderford at home, having to watch their chairman dance up and down the touchline waving at our crowd. So either of those two being wins, I'd have very happily swapped, definitely.
Fantastic. And just one final one. I believe this is a bit of an inside joke amongst the players. What size are your shoes?
I take a very small size 15 shoe.
Fantastic. Hilly, that's fantastic. Thank you so much for your time, and hope to see you soon back at Richmond, and for a fantastic season ahead in the championship.
Cheers, Tom. Thank you very much indeed.
Not a problem. And everyone, this has been Inside Richmond, the official vodcast of Richmond Rugby Club. Tune in next week for another episode.